Well, it's lovely to be out on such a sunny evening in Edinburgh, but it's a shame that we have to be out tonight protesting against the two-child cap and the rate clause. Well more than a year since Alison Thewlis, my colleague at Westminster, first spotted it in the small print of a Tory budget.
Very glad to see such a huge demonstration today and so many people still coming along 1 year after the rate clause came into force to show their opposition to this vile and despicable policy. The UK government have never been able to justify this policy, and we saw that this week with Esther McVeigh's pathetic attempts to say that the rate clause was somehow double support for women and that gives them some kind of chance to talk about the most appalling and disturbing experience of their life.
As you can see behind me, we're at the very beginning of the All Under One Banner rally. You can obviously hear the pipers behind me as events are about to kick off.
It's time to aim high, look resolutely outwards, and never, ever accept second best. Above all, it's time to believe that we can. We can build that better country we know is possible. And friends, we will.
If you enjoy watching our programmes, please help us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster by signing up to become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what actions it is taking to tackle fly tipping.
Minister Marie Goujon.
Fly tipping is illegal, dangerous and unnecessary. It also creates unnecessary costs for local authorities and landowners and often involves resources which could be recycled or reused. To tackle this, we've provided SEPA and local authorities with powers to fine people who are caught fly tipping, with a minimum fixed penalty of £200 up to a maximum fine of £40,000 if prosecuted. We also support reporting of fly tipping using fly mapper software and dumb dumpers. But the key to resolving the issue, we believe, is education and prevention, and work on that is undertaken by Zero Waste Scotland, SEPA and the Scottish Partnership Against Rural Crime.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Minister for that answer. During a recent meeting with local farmers in my region of Mid-Scotland and Fife, it became clear that this situation has become even more worrying, with one farmer expressing fury that he had to pay for the removal of asbestos fly-tipped on his land. This is clearly not just a scourge on the landscape, but is now a danger to public health. Therefore, Minister, what urgent action will the Scottish Government take to address this?
Minister.
I completely understand the concern that's been raised by Alexander Stewart, and I know that it's something I hear about in my own constituency too, but I think that we are looking at measures through the Circular Economy Bill, and there are measures there which are out to consultation at the moment which we hope will help to prevent this, but that's where we do believe that prevention and education is key. And I met with the Scottish Partnership Against Rural Crime earlier this year, and I know that tackling fly tipping is one of their priorities too. So there are a number of measures either underway or currently planned that we hope will have an impact on this blight on our communities.
And Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Minister advise on plans for the National Litter Strategy, please?
Minister.
The Scottish Government is committed to delivering against the National Litter Strategy, and last year we published the updated Code of Practice on litter and refuse, and we'll be bringing forward legislation for a new penalty regime for littering from vehicles, again as part of the Circular Economy Bill. And these are commitments which we made in the National Litter Strategy. The strategy contains a commitment to conduct a review in 2020, and we're currently considering how best we take that forward.
Thank you. Question number 2, Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it's doing to improve the safety of young drivers.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
Young drivers are a priority area for the Road Safety Framework to 2020. This year we launched a substantial social marketing campaign to address issues which affect young driver safety, including speed, mobile phones, distraction, drink and drug driving and vulnerable road users. The Road Safety Framework Fund has also supported a number of projects for this priority group. This includes Drive VR, a classroom-based virtual reality experience, and DriveWise, a multi-agency approach to improving the skills and behaviour of young drivers. In addition, we continue to press the UK Government to introduce graduated driver licensing.
Gillian Martin.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. One of the criticisms I have of the driving test that it doesn't really have any rural driving safety aspect to it. Young drivers only have to learn the skills to pass a test in an urban environment in most cases. If funding were made available to school to contract specialist driver education in a type that's tailored and appropriate for that area, we may be able to reduce the amount of accidents on rural roads, which are more likely to be life-threatening. And I know the Cabinet Secretary has contacted the UK Government about the graduated driver licence. But in the meantime, is the Cabinet Secretary open to looking at options that don't rely on the UK Government, like a young driver safety fund that schools could apply for to deliver specialist training appropriate to their area?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I do recognise the concerns which the member has raised regarding rural driving, although she will recognise that the driver test programme is a matter which is reserved to the UK Government. We are, however, engaged with the Department for Transport at the UK Government through a project which they're running, which is the Driver 2020 programme, which has been taken forward and managed by the Transport Research Laboratory. This is about looking at developing new guidance on future interventions specifically for this age group in helping to improve their driver behaviour. There are some interventions which we have funded through our Road Safety Framework Fund, which is very similar, I think, to the fund of the nature that the member is referring to. Some of the initiatives which I mentioned in my previous answer have been supported through that particular fund. For example, the education resource for 16 to 18-year-olds, which is about demonstrating driver safety consequences as a result of poor driver behaviour. And there is still access to that fund available for various initiatives around distraction and speeding on rural roads. So if there are local initiatives which the member has a view that could benefit from accessing this fund, I'd be more than happy to hear from the member to ensure that officials look into the matter.
Thank you very much. And question 3, Ross Greer.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to support the training of pupil support assistants on working with pupils with additional needs.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Additional Support for Learning Act places duties on education authorities to identify, provide for and review the additional support needs of their pupils. It is for individual authorities to determine the training required by those staff, providing support to help pupils reach their full potential. In support of this, the Scottish Government has, as part of a package of support for school staff, has funded and co-produced specific training materials on inclusion, dyslexia and autism.
Ross Greer.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. There has been a worrying trend over a long period of time towards unqualified classroom assistants delivering one-on-one support to pupils with additional support needs. The Scottish Government's recent announcement of the recruitment of 1,000 pupil support assistants to work specifically with children with additional needs is very welcome. Will those additional staff be required to have qualifications in supporting additional needs? And if not, how can they possibly be described as additional support needs assistants? Cabinet Secretary.
The Government is taking forward discussions with our local authority partners about the deployment of the £15 million in resources that we have allocated to recruit 1,000 pupil support assistants to support young people with additional support needs. Those discussions are ongoing and I hope they can come to a conclusion shortly. Obviously, as I indicated in my earlier answer, if staff are working with pupils with additional support needs, they should be appropriately and effectively trained for that purpose, and that would be an obligation that should be taken forward by individual local authorities in ensuring that their staff are properly trained and equipped for the tasks for which they are recruited.
Thank you. Question number 4, Alex Rowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government, in light of public authorities not taking the necessary action to clear waste from the M90 Commerce Park at Lathalmond near Dunfermline, what action it can take to address local residents' environmental concerns?
Minister Marie Goujon.
Responsibility for the site rests with the landowner Trans-Britannia Properties Limited, and following further correspondence from SEPA, the landowner has now agreed to meet with SEPA and Fife Council to discuss the options for site clearance. I know that this might be considered a small step forward, but it is a very important one. SEPA continues to monitor the site and they're content that it's not currently posing a risk to the environment or to human health. The focus for the moment, therefore, remains on working collaboratively with the landowner and other relevant parties, including Fife Council, to try and secure a positive outcome.
Rowley.
Presiding officer, when I met with SEPA, I think 6-8 months ago, they at that stage were saying that they were due to have a meeting with representatives of the landowner. So there's not a lot of progress being made there. Over 7,000 tonnes of carpets and plasterboard were dumped on this site. The majority of that carpet and plasterboard came from local authorities and other public authorities across Scotland. Surely the government cannot allow this to continue year after year after year. It's an environmental disaster that nobody seems to be willing to take any responsibility for. Will the Minister agree to meet with me on the site to have a look at this, to see what can be done to address this issue?
Minister.
I can completely understand the concern and frustration that the member has about this issue, because it has been ongoing for such a long time. But that's where I do think this meeting that's been secured now will be a positive step forward. I'd be happy to meet with them to discuss that further and see how this can be further progressed. But it is very much the landowner's responsibility to deal with, and that's why we are trying to work with them to ensure that we can deal with this and get it dealt with as soon as possible.
Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Minister, it doesn't seem fair that local community and residents have to put up with this eyesore. Why hasn't the Scottish Government or the local authority just cleared the site and sort out who is responsible later?
Minister.
Again, I completely understand any concern and frustration about this, especially when it has been going on for so long, and especially for people that either live around that area and are having to see that and put up with this situation. But we inherently believe that it shouldn't be up to the public to pay for this when it is the landowner's responsibility. So again, that's why we are determined to pursue all avenues for the landowner to take appropriate action first. And I want to be clear that we will pursue all possible avenues for action in that regard.
Thank you. Question number 5, John Mason.
To ask the Scottish Government what it can do to tackle the issue of split ticketing for train fares, whereby it can be cheaper to purchase tickets for component parts of a journey rather than one straight-through ticket.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
The ScotRail franchise prohibits the franchisee from implementing any train fares that create an anomaly whereby purchasing separate tickets may be cheaper than one straight-through ticket. Where any anomalies are identified, ScotRail should reduce the affected fare at the next fare setting round, removing the anomaly. The current franchise includes a price promise scheme, so passengers do not have to pay a higher fare than necessary. Additionally, the Rail Delivery Group is conducting a review of the ticketing system across the UK, aiming to guarantee that these systems are focused on customer needs.
John Mason.
I thank the Minister for the answer, and I appreciate that work is being done in this area. But the reality is that an off-peak day return from Garrahill, my local station, to Perth is £29.90. An off-peak day return from Garrahill to Queen Street is £3.30, and an off-peak day return from Queen Street to Perth is £16.60, totalling £19.90. So there is a £10 difference, that is 50% difference in the fare. And especially if a constituent buys a ticket at the machine, they cannot know, whereas if they buy a ticket at the ticket office, the ticket officer can tell them to split the ticket.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I recognise the concern which the member has raised, and there has been significant work being undertaken since 2012 in eradicating these anomalies. I understand, though, that some of the anomalies actually date back as late as the 1990s as a result of various promotions and schemes which were operating over those previous years, and at times they can come out through the existing system. What I can assure the member is the very anomaly which the member has raised. I'll ask that my officials raise this matter with ScotRail to ensure that it is eradicated from the system.
Question number 6, Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's had with Fife and Lothian Council since January 2019 regarding the traffic flows on the Queensferry crossing.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
No specific discussions have taken place with Fife or Lothian councils regarding traffic flow on the Queensferry crossing. Transport Scotland will be engaging with the councils over the coming weeks as part of the stakeholder engagement programme, supporting the evaluation of the fourth replacement crossing project in line with the Scottish Trunk Road Infrastructure Project evaluation process. The evaluation will consider pre-opening and post-opening traffic data.
Smith.
Could I thank the Minister? I'm rather concerned to hear that there haven't been any meetings taking place, because in recent months several Fife constituents have been in touch with me complaining bitterly about the lengthy queues and time delays on the North Queensferry approach to the crossing, making the point that the rush hour traffic congestion is as bad as it was when the Queensferry crossing didn't exist. Is it not time to rethink these traffic flows and certainly to engage with the two relevant councils?
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, I do recognise there have been issues around congestion at the fourth crossing, the Queensferry crossing, which have been as a result of a range of different matters. And there is a meeting which is due to take place, I believe, in January with Fife Council and Transport Scotland to discuss some of these issues. However, the member would be wrong to suggest that the Queensferry crossing has made no impact in helping to improve resilience across the Forth and traffic flow across the Forth. Since the bridge was opened, it has maintained traffic crossing the Forth on 30 occasions when the Forth road bridge would have been closed to traffic. That in itself has been a significant improvement in improving resilience across the Forth. However, there are always areas where further measures can be undertaken, and that's exactly what the discussions that are planned in January through Transport Scotland and Fife Council are intended to address.
Question number 7, Stewart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with Abellio ScotRail regarding revenue protection.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, Transport Scotland officials meet Abellio ScotRail on a full weekly basis to discuss a range of items, one of which is revenue collection performance. This includes a focus on revenue protection support to on-train and booking office staff, as well as plans for revenue protection during specific events.
Stewart McMillan.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for his reply, but does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that certainly Abellio ScotRail should do more to protect their revenue and stop customers evading ticket inspectors, listen to the complaints from paying customers about fare evasion, and also have more staff and stations that don't have barriers, or simply have more stations with barriers?
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, the member raises a very important issue, and there's been a range of work which has been undertaken in order to help to improve revenue protection across the rail network, including the approach which is taken by ScotRail, which is to buy before you board. This in itself has actually helped to reduce ticket evasion levels by a significant amount, and it's almost helped to improve the income from the franchise by some 38% as a result of a range of these measures. ScotRail's revenue protection team continue to look at other initiatives that can be undertaken in order to help to protect revenue and ticketless travel, and those measures will continue to be proactively introduced at appropriate times.
And Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that the reason many passengers board trains without a ticket is due to lengthy queues at machines, or machines that are not working at all and they have no other choice. So what conversation has he had with ScotRail around improving access to machines and the ability to purchase a ticket?
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, the number of ticket vending machines over the course of the last 5 years has increased by some 60% in order to help to improve access to ticketing across the network. And that will continue to be rolled out as we move forward in order to improve opportunities for passengers to purchase tickets timelessly as well. The member will also be aware of the increasing approach which ScotRail will have to smart cards and the use of smart ticketing as a means in which people can purchase a ticket prior to arriving at the train station as well, to help to reduce the number of individuals who may have to purchase a ticket when they arrive at the station. So a combination of these different methods are all about helping to improve purchasing tickets prior to travelling on a train.
Thank you. Question 8, Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports people living with dementia.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
The Scottish Government is implementing the 2017-20 National Dementia Strategy to support improvements including post-diagnostic support and integrated home care. Free personal care for people assessed as eligible, including those with dementia, has now been extended to under 65s, and we are currently considering Alzheimer's Scotland's Fair Dementia Care report as part of our reform of adult social care support. Programme for Government 2019-20 says we will develop a fourth national dementia strategy and establish a national brain health centre to promote brain health literacy, and work is underway on both of those.
Bob Doris.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Can I ask the Scottish Government for a bit more information on how it supports those living with end-stage dementia to access services such as palliative care, specialist nurses and consultant geriatrics, but also, Presiding Officer, how, and it was referred to in the initial answer, Presiding Officer, how the Government will work constructively with Alzheimer's Scotland, who have a powerful and compelling case to make sure that such supports are provided without incurring social care charges.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to the member for that question. There are a number of points to the answer to this. We have 2 national dementia workforce programmes, co-funding with Alzheimer's Scotland and Health Board's the Dementia Nurse Consultants Programme and through our National Post-Diagnostic Service. We're also piloting new models of care and support, including in primary care and through a major new pilot in Inverclyde on home care for people with dementia with intensive and palliative care needs, and supporting the implementation of the independent expert report published last year on modernising specialist inpatient and community care. In terms of costs, we're taking this forward with Alzheimer's Scotland in terms of their report as part, as I said, of our national programme to support local reform, a programme which at its core is being led by those who use the service. And I'll be happy to update the member in due course as that comes forward. I should also say to him that I very recently had a productive meeting with Sir Jackie Stewart and Professor Siddhartha Chandran from the Director of the Centre for Clinical Brain Sciences at Edinburgh Neuroscience and other colleagues, looking at how we can continue to support the important research in this area, which of course includes a number of neuro conditions, but particularly MND and multiple sclerosis, and through them to dementia.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. And that concludes general questions. Now, before we move on to First Minister's questions, I'm sure members would like to join me in welcoming to our gallery the Right Honourable Regi Torrent, President of the Parliament of Catalonia. Thank you. We turn to First Minister's questions. Question number 1, Jackson Carlo.
Presiding Officer, the Health Secretary has now ordered government officials to go into Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board to find out what has gone wrong at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. So can I ask what progress has been made? Can the First Minister set out how many individual cases of infection between 2016 and 2019 government officials have now identified? And if not, can she set out whether it is substantially more than the figures about which we already know?
First Minister.
Well, in terms of the first part of Jackson Carlo's question, since the Health Secretary's announcement last Friday about the escalation of the oversight of Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board, particularly around the areas of infection prevention and control and communication with patients and families, an oversight board has been established. That oversight board is chaired by the Chief Nursing Officer, Professor Fiona McQueen. It met yesterday and confirmed that it will focus on 3 key areas: infection prevention and control, clinical governance and patient and family communication. And as appropriate, of course, the Health Secretary will keep Parliament updated on the progress of its work. In terms of the second part of Jackson Carlo's question, I should say there is work ongoing with Health Protection Scotland to make sure we fully are aware of numbers of infections following previous claims that were made around an internal clinician-led review. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde confirmed to the Scottish Government that in 2017, there were 26 organisms identified in 14 children and 14 children affected, but there is other work ongoing in terms of the other years that have been affected. Jackson Carlo may be aware, I'm sure is aware, of the Health Protection Scotland report that was published this week, which is a technical report, but nevertheless provides some important information. The last point I would make, obviously, in terms of providing not just information, but proper investigation and assurance about the situation at the Queen Elizabeth, Lord Brodie has been confirmed this morning as the chair of the public inquiry, and the Health Secretary will have discussions with him about the precise remit of the public inquiry before the Christmas break.
Jackson Carlo.
Yes, can I welcome the appointment of Lord Brodie? But obviously the circumstances and conditions in the hospital are such that there is obviously urgent questions we need to ask and action that needs to take place just now. And I'm pleased to hear about the Oversight Board. At the weekend, the Health Secretary was asked about the clinical report into infections at the Sick Kids Hospital in 2017, revealed by a whistleblower now 2 weeks ago. And as the First Minister said, this is a clinician-led report which revealed that 26 infections affected 14 sick children in that year. Now, on Sunday, the Health Secretary said she had seen some of the report, but not all of it. So can I ask the First Minister whether she and the Health Secretary have now got the full report on their desk, and whether they have had time to read it now in full, and whether, in fact, any action has followed from that as a result?
First Minister.
The Oversight Board, as I understand it now, has all of the information that is contained in what has been described as a report that was clinically led. And let me just be very clear, the Oversight Board will be, as part of the work it's been doing, gathering all data together from 2015 so that it can establish confidently the number of different bugs and the number of cases of infections, as well as the number of children affected. That is important work, but I'm sure Jackson Carlaw will appreciate, I hope he will appreciate, that it is important that we do that work rigorously and accurately so that the information that is provided we have confidence in. So that work is ongoing, and as I said in my earlier answer, Parliament will be kept updated as appropriate. The wider issues, of course, will be for the public inquiry to consider once it gets underway.
Jackson Carlaw.
Again, thank you for that. But also in the weekend's press, we read reports that in addition to the 26 infections in 2017, the whistleblower had identified a further 10 infections cases the year before. Now, like everything else in this scandal, it seems we have to wait for reports to emerge in the press before finding out what has actually been going on. What has the Scottish Government done in the 4 days since those claims surfaced to examine whether, in fact, they are accurate? And is it the case that infection incidents were indeed being reported as far back as 2016? And if so, shouldn't that perhaps have set alarm bells ringing?
First Minister.
Well, the Health Protection Scotland report that I referred to earlier on, I should say it is a very technical report, but it points to the periods, including specific months, where it has identified what it calls spikes in infections. It should say it has said that the infection rates right now are not abnormal or above what would be expected. But in terms of the detailed questions that Jackson Carlaw is asking, that is exactly what the Oversight Board, with assistance as appropriate from Health Protection Scotland, is seeking to establish, so that we are confident that there is no under-reporting of numbers of infection and there's no duplication in the figures that are being reported, and that work is ongoing and will be taken forward as quickly as possible. In terms of information coming from whistleblowers, let me just say as an aside, whistleblowers who come forward with information like this do a service to patient safety in the NHS and should always be treated appropriately. But I would say to, I know the Health Secretary will meet with 2 whistleblowers, I think, next week. Anybody who feels they have information that should be brought to the attention of the Scottish Government or now the Oversight Board should come forward and come forward directly to the Health Secretary if necessary, so that we can be absolutely clear that all information is being treated properly, with respect, and being investigated appropriately.
Jackson Carlaw.
Well, thank you, and I hope that they do. I mean, last week I said that this issue is now about trust. Now, parents and patients are waiting for answers and need some clarity from the Government on exactly what has happened at the hospital. The priority has been to be providing the truth to the families, who, as we've learned in recent weeks, have only discovered the facts thanks to whistleblowers and leaks to newspapers. Now, the First Minister and the Health Secretary are still asking for time to answer some of the key questions which remain unanswered, and I appreciate that she has instructed the Oversight Board to report. But how much longer will patients and parents have to wait? When will these answers be available? The Government has now put itself in charge, so when will the First Minister and her Health Secretary be able to respond?
First Minister.
Firstly, I absolutely understand that parents in particular, but actually the wider public as well, want to have information and answers to any reasonable, legitimate question that there is here. I want that too. But it is important that the information that is provided is robust information that has been properly investigated. Anybody who does read the Health Protection Scotland report that was published this week will get an understanding of how complex some of these issues are. That is no comfort to parents whose children are affected, but in terms of understanding the types of infection, the numbers of infection, the number of cases and the number of children affected, it is important that that work is done properly. The Government is absolutely committed to making sure that there is absolute transparency around all of this. That is why Health Protection Scotland and the Healthcare Environment Scotland are both involved in this. It's why the independent review was established, which of course will report, we hope, early next year. It's why the public inquiry has also been announced, with the chair, of course, appointed today, and why this oversight board is now working. So this is extremely important, that that transparency is there, but that the information being provided is accurate and robust, and that is what we are committed to doing. The Health Secretary is intending to make an update statement to Parliament before the Christmas recess, in order that Parliament can be fully appraised of the progress of this work, with any timescales that are flowing from that.
Thank you. Question number 2, Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Could the First Minister tell us when she last discussed delays to toxicology and post-mortem reports with the Lord Advocate?
First Minister.
I have had briefings from the Lord Advocate over recent weeks and months about these kind of issues. I would have to go back and check exactly the detail of those issues, but I'm very happy to do so and report back to Richard Leonard once I've had that opportunity.
Richard Leonard.
First Minister, are you aware of the backlog of delays in reports from the Glasgow University, which is in an arrangement with the Crown Office, but is currently in a contractual dispute with the Crown Office over the provision of toxicology services? This is a matter of public interest, and it is also a matter of public concern, and it is bereaved families who are paying the price. Families like brother and sister Gary and Emma from Lanarkshire. Their mum Susan died suddenly at the end of May this year. They are grieving the loss of a much-loved mother and a much-missed grandmother. But instead of getting answers to give them some closure and some peace, they have been waiting 26 weeks for a final post-mortem report, and they are still waiting. They have received a standard 6-weekly letter 3 times. The Crown Office says that a contractual dispute is to blame, but that's no consolation to Gary and Emma, who have told us that their mum's life insurance won't pay out without a death certificate. And so they are being chased by a mortgage lender threatening repossession of the family home. And they could, and they should have been spared this deep anxiety, this additional uncertainty, and this unnecessary pain. So, First Minister, will you take the opportunity today to apologise to Gary and Emma and to all of those bereaved families across Scotland who have been going through the same ordeal?
First Minister.
Well, firstly, can I take the opportunity to put on record my deepest condolences to the family whose situation has been raised by Richard Leonard. Beyond what Richard Leonard has told me, obviously, I am not familiar with the detail of that case, but I would be very happy to look into that. I'm sure the Justice Secretary and or the Lord Advocate, as appropriate, would be happy to meet with or correspond with that family. On the substantive issue that Richard Leonard has raised, there has been an issue with the Glasgow contract. There has now been an agreement to extend that contract to allow these issues to be resolved in the short term. Longer term, the Crown Office is considering the future of that service and whether it continues, if it cannot continue to be performed by Glasgow University, what the appropriate arrangements for that are in the future. That's the issue, as I said in my earlier answer to Richard Leonard. The Lord Advocate has been keeping me briefed on, and if there are more details that I can usefully make available to Richard Leonard about the generality of the issue as well as in the individual case, I'd be very happy to do so.
Richard Leonard.
Well, this facility at Glasgow University that deals with sudden and unexpected deaths also handles 90% of suspected drug-related deaths in Scotland. Now, the First Minister is well aware that Scotland is in the grip of a drug death emergency. So the First Minister must also be aware of the key role that this unit plays in informing the allocation of resources to prevent future drug deaths. First Minister, this is a public service which you are responsible for. This dispute is something which you can resolve. The damage done is not just financial, it is human. So will you step up? Will you step in? Will you find a resolution to this long-running contractual dispute for the sake of our public health, for the sake of preventing future drug deaths, and for the sake of these grieving families?
First Minister.
Look, these are important issues, and I don't demur for that, from that for a second. These services are vital. There has been a contractual dispute. I don't think it would be possible or appropriate or helpful for me to get into the reasons underlying that right now, but the Crown Office and Glasgow University, just to be clear, have been working together to manage the transition to a new provider for these services. That is obviously a priority for the Crown Office. It's a priority for the Scottish Government, because we understand the importance of having these services in place. Toxicology services play a vital role within the justice system, but also in terms of investigation of drugs-related deaths. So these issues are extremely important. In terms of my involvement, as I said, the Lord Advocate is keeping me updated on this, but these issues have a priority attention from the Lord Advocate and the Crown Office. And as I say, if there is more information that I can helpfully provide to Richard Leonard or others in the Chamber with an interest in this, I would be very happy to do so and to keep him updated as these discussions proceed.
Thank you. You've got a number of constituency supplementary questions. The first from Peter Chapman, to be followed by Anas Sarwar. Peter Chapman.
Aye, thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, one of my constituents, Mr Watson, has raised a serious issue around waiting times for dermatology department at the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. Mr Watson attended his GP 2 years ago and was diagnosed with a basal sarcoma near his eye. After diagnosis, he then had to wait a full year to see a specialist within the department who informed him that he would need surgery on the surrounding area. He's been waiting a further 10 months and no treatment has been received. So nearly 2 years later, First Minister, nothing has been done. And a second lesion has now appeared on his ear. This breaches numerous waiting times targets on cancer treatment and referral and is totally unacceptable. Do you agree, and what is being done to address this scandalous situation?
First Minister.
Well, firstly, from what Peter Chapman has recounted to the Chamber, yes, I do agree that is not an acceptable wait for Mr Watson. I would, through Peter Chapman, convey my best wishes to him. The Health Secretary will be very happy to look into the individual case if Peter Chapman wants to provide the details of his constituent to us. More generally, as Peter Chapman will be aware, we have the £850 million waiting times improvement programme underway to make sure that as demand for healthcare services rises in Scotland as elsewhere, the health service is building the capacity to meet that demand. But we'd be very happy to look into Mr Watson's case.
And Anas Sarwar, to be followed by Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, 2 weeks ago I reviewed details of a child's death at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital due to contaminated water. More damning evidence has now been shared with me. The evidence shows that the Health Board knew the water was contaminated when it was transferred from the contractor to the Health Board. A report done the week the hospital was opened revealed that the water supply was not safe and there was a high risk of infections. Months before Millie died, infection control doctors raised concerns about line infections in the children's cancer ward. 3 weeks before Millie died, infection control doctors alerted management of further concerns about infections, escalated this to Health Protection Scotland and the Scottish Government, and requested testing of the water. A month after Millie's death, another assessment of the water supply was done, which again found the water supply was not safe and said there was still a high risk of infections. At each of these stages, these warnings were ignored and the appropriate action was not taken. It led to the death of at least one child. If this happened in the private sector, there wouldn't be a public inquiry. there would be a criminal investigation. First Minister, what did you, your ministers and officials know and when? Who will take responsibility and be held accountable for this? Because be in no doubt, I and many others will not rest until we get justice and answers for Millie's parents and all the parents of the children affected.
First Minister.
Well, can I thank Anna Sarwar for again raising this issue and give him an assurance that the Scottish Government is determined to get the answers that Millie's parents and parents of any children who have been treated at the Queen Elizabeth want and deserve. I am not aware of what evidence Anna Sarwar is citing today. I would encourage him to share that with us. When I say I'm not aware of it, I haven't seen specifically what he is citing in the Chamber today. If I can see that, then obviously I'll be able to look at that, as will the Health Secretary, to see whether it is information the Scottish Government's already had or whether it's information the Scottish Government is not aware of. The reason we have ordered the public inquiry is to make sure that, in addition to all of the work that has been done, that there is complete transparency and, if necessary, complete accountability around these issues. Anna Sarwar referred to criminal investigations. Clearly, it is not my job and it's not for me to direct criminal investigations, but it is my job to make sure that the Scottish Government takes all appropriate action to get to the bottom of all of these issues, and that's what I and the Health Secretary are determined to do.
Thank you. Angela Constance, to be followed by Liam MacArthur. Angela Constance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister has taken a keen interest in my constituents affected by a death abroad, and I warmly welcome the commitment in the SNP manifesto to press the next UK Government to implement all the recommendations in the recent report by the all-party political group on deaths abroad and consular services. However, some of the recommendations in that report are Scotland-specific, so will the First Minister commit to implementing those recommendations where she has the power to do so, of course?
First Minister.
Where the Scottish Government has the power to act here, we will certainly do everything that we can to take forward the recommendations. I welcome the work of the all-party parliamentary group on deaths abroad. I think the work that's come out of that is very helpful and productive to allow us to make sure progress has been made on these issues. So the Scottish Government will do what we can within our powers. We will also continue to press relevant UK Government departments, agencies, services, or in some cases third-party organisations to recognise the issues involved here and make sure that they are taking the action that is required as well. And we will, in summary, press for all of the recommendations in the all-party parliamentary group report to be implemented.
Liam MacArthur, to be followed by John Finney.
Thanks very much, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of the recent BBC programme highlighting environmental impacts of meat production in the US and South America. Does she share the concern of many farmers in Orkney and in farming communities across the country that this programme made little or no attempt to explain the vast differences between massively intensive American livestock production and practices here in the UK, which generally adhere to much higher environmental and animal welfare standards? And does she agree with the leaders of the four main UK farming unions that such one-sided, partial portrayals of the agriculture sector, quote, do nothing to help people make informed choices about food which can be grown and reared in ways that offer benefits to the environment?
First Minister.
Yes, I do agree. I do agree very strongly with those comments. I have not yet had the opportunity myself to see the programme, but I've heard these concerns that have been raised about it, about its inability to draw the distinctions and make the differences that Liam MacArthur has referred to. Clearly, there are environmental challenges for our own sector here, but I think it is really important that we recognise the quality of that and the work that has been done, and not allow lazy reporting to sort of impugn the integrity of the sector here with practices elsewhere that we would all deplore. So I thank Liam MacArthur for raising what is an important issue.
John Finney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, in response to a Scottish Government consultation on short-term lets, Highland Council reported 8,000 people needing a home. The Scottish Government's own research showed that nearly 20% of the houses on the island of Skye are now Airbnb lets. A month ago, First Minister promised my colleague Alison Johnson the Scottish Government would publish its response to the consultation before the end of the year. With 9 sitting days left, can the First Minister advise what measures the Scottish Government is considering and when members are likely to see proposals for much-needed regulation in the short-term letting sector?
First Minister.
Well, we are committed to seeing better regulation in this sector because we understand the pressures in particular areas of the country, here in Edinburgh, for example, and in the areas that John Finney has mentioned in his own region. The date in which we will publish that consultation, I will provide to John Finney. I don't have the specific date in front of me right now. More generally, of course, the Scottish Government is investing heavily in house supply, homes supply, in terms of increasing the availability of good quality homes available to people, and that work is work that we are determined to take forward at pace.
Question number 3, Willie Rennie.
2 weeks ago, the Justice Secretary, Humza Yousaf, said he was very satisfied with the support provided to police officers. This week, new research found that just 3% of police officers believe Police Scotland really cares about their health and well-being. Just 3%. Does Humza Yousaf know what's going on?
First Minister.
I think, and I hope Willie Rennie would accept this, we all care. We all care deeply about the health and well-being of our police officers. I certainly do. I absolutely believe Willie Rennie does, Humza Yousaf does. We all do, because we know the exceptional job that police officers do day in and day out. By coincidence, of course, the Police Bravery Awards will take place later today, and I would take this opportunity to put on record my gratitude and appreciation of our police officers at the length and breadth of the country. Mental health support and support for well-being is extremely important within Police Scotland. Police officers and police staff can access a range of services to care for both their physical and mental health, including through Police Scotland's Your Wellbeing Matters programme. Police Scotland is one of the first police services in the UK to implement mental health and suicide intervention training for all officers. The Scottish Government is providing funding to extend the Lifeline Scotland Wellbeing programme to blue light responders, including the police. Police Scotland launched their wellbeing programme back in 2017, which includes the introduction of wellbeing champions, and a force-wide wellbeing and engagement survey will be launched early next year. So I am not standing here at all and saying that there is not more we should always be looking to do to support those public sector workers like police officers on the front line, but we all care about their health and well-being, and that is reflected on the action that has been taken and the support that is available.
Willie Rennie.
The question I asked was, does the Justice Secretary know what's going on? And the First Minister refused to answer the question. Because how can anybody be satisfied when just 3% of officers feel that Police Scotland really cares? How can he be satisfied with that woeful position? The Justice Secretary is out of touch whilst our police officers are struggling. Because look at the research. This is new research. It found that 1 in 10 police officers turn to alcohol or prescription drugs to cope. 1 in 10. Almost half suffer from exhaustion. And this is the most devastating of all. 1/3 of officers are turning up to work mentally unwell. 1/3 turning up to work mentally unwell. How can anybody be satisfied with that position? That's the men and women of our police sacrificing their mental health to keep us all safe. And Callum Steele, the General Secretary of the Scottish Police Federation, told me that these findings were frightening. Frightening. That's what he told me. So why has the welfare of our police in Scotland gone so horribly wrong? Will she answer that question?
First Minister.
Well, firstly, nobody, not me, not Humza Yousaf, not anybody, I would imagine, in this chamber is satisfied at all. If police officers or nurses or any public sector workers are reporting that they don't feel as supported as they want to be in their job, and government has a duty to respond to that. Much of what I said in response to my earlier answer sets out the action that the Scottish Government is taking and will continue to take to make sure that we are doing everything we can to support our frontline police officers. Of course, one of the other things that we have done to support frontline police officers is ensure that there are 1,000 more police officers working in Scotland than there were when this government took office. And I would also say to Willie Rennie that we did that during the very period, or we have sustained that during the very period that the Liberal Democrats were helping the Tories to impose austerity on our budget. And leading, of course, to a situation in England where 20,000 police officers were cut from service. It's because of the actions of this government that there continues to be 1,000 more police officers in Scotland. That demonstrates we will always work to support the police officers of Scotland who do such a fantastic job day in and day out.
Thank you. There's quite a few supplementary questions. Liam Kerr to be followed by Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week a significant case review was published into the Dundee Law Killer. Amongst a number of damning conclusions, it exposed terrifying flaws where officials believed he was playing the system and had psychopathic tendencies which increased the likelihood of future violent reoffending. Linda MacDonald, the victim of a brutal attack by this violent criminal whilst he was on home leave, has said that this cannot be allowed to happen again. She's right. Does the First Minister agree with Linda MacDonald that the time has come to look at giving judges the option to put the worst criminals in prison for the rest of their lives?
First Minister.
Well, can I first of all acknowledge the bravery of Mrs MacDonald in this case, and I would extend again my deepest sympathy to her and of course to the family of Robbie McIntosh's first victim. The significant case review here was a very important exercise. It found that the attack on Mrs MacDonald couldn't have been predicted, that Robbie McIntosh alone was responsible for that. Nevertheless, the Scottish Government and the Scottish Prison Service are committed to learning from all of the findings of the report and will build on actions already taken. For example, the SPS have already implemented improvements to the risk assessment and progression processes and also delivered new training. So we will take forward all of the recommendations and take forward all of them seriously. In terms of whole life sentences, Mrs MacDonald has written to me on this issue and I pay tribute to her for doing so. I have said to her that I will never close my mind to any suggestions that are about keeping the people of Scotland safe. However, as I've pointed out to the member before and to others in this chamber, it is possible for a judge, if a judge considers it appropriate, to impose a punishment part of a sentence that extends beyond the natural life of a prisoner. That indeed happened in the World's End case. It's also the case that when a punishment part of a sentence expires, it is for the parole board to decide whether it is safe to release somebody from prison. So these are the arrangements in place, but in the interests of victims of crime like Mrs MacDonald, who has shown exceptional bravery in this, the Scottish Government will always consider what more can be done to make sure that we are keeping people across Scotland safe.
Gillian Martin to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week is Estranged Student Solidarity Week. Can I ask the First Minister what's been done in our colleges and universities in Scotland to support estranged students who have no parental support?
First Minister.
Well, we are very committed to ensuring that all students, including estranged students, have the same opportunities. In response to the Student Support Review, we've increased and expanded access to further and higher education bursaries. Estranged students in higher education have access to a minimum income of £7,750 through a combination of bursaries and loans, and students in further education can access a maximum bursary of £4,500. I am conscious of the excellent campaign from the charity Stand Alone, working, of course, with Gillian Martin to extend the Care Experience bursary to estranged students, and I can tell the Chamber today that we are looking at that issue, and once we've had the opportunity to consider it fully, we'll report back as quickly as possible.
Jackie Bailey to be followed by Graham Simpson.
I know the First Minister doesn't travel on my local train service to Dumbarton, Helensburgh or Balloch, because if she did, she would know that the trains are regularly cancelled or delayed. They arrive at rush hour with 3 carriages instead of 6, and it's standing room only for passengers crammed in like sardines. Stop skipping is back, and passengers are being left stranded at stations far away from home. And to add insult to injury, prices continue to rise whilst the service continues to get worse. Can I ask the First Minister, when will she come down on the side of passengers rather than protecting the really poor service from Abellio?
First Minister.
The Scottish Government always acts to seek the improvements to services that passengers deserve. Abellio have an obligation to make sure that they are tackling, and they are tackling, the issues that Jackie Bailey has described, and it is absolutely right and proper that they do so. Of course, consideration of the future of that franchise will continue in line with the requirements that we work within, but I make no bones about expecting Abellio to deliver the improvements that passengers deserve and that Scottish taxpayers pay handsomely for.
Graham Simpson, to be followed by Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was contacted by a 72-year-old constituent in East Kilbride, Matthew Rogers. Matthew worked for 50 years as a nurse in the NHS, retiring at the age of 67. He has osteoarthritis and has been in pain for 15 years. He's been told he needs a new hip. He's also received a letter saying the treatment time guarantee has been missed and he's got no idea when he'll be treated. I visited him on Sunday and asked to see any correspondence he's had. So he crawled upstairs and crawled back down backwards. Mr. Rogers told me, I'm at the stage where my life is totally on hold. I suffer daily. We're considering using the money we've set aside for our funerals to pay for treatment. That is difficult to bear. So what can the First Minister say to Mr. Rogers and thousands like him for whom the treatment time guarantee has proved worthless?
First Minister.
Well, in respect of Mr Rogers, as I say, whenever an individual case is raised in this chamber, the Health Secretary is happy to look into that if details are provided. I would thank Mr Rogers for his service to the NHS. But this is, of course, not just about individual cases raised in the chamber. In terms of patients across Scotland, the reason that we have embarked upon the waiting times improvement plan, backed by the substantial resources, the £850 million, is because we recognise the increasing demand on our health services and we are determined to support health boards build the capacity to meet that demand, and that work is underway, and the Health Secretary and I, of course, monitor that work closely and carefully and will continue to do so.
Ross Greer, to be followed by George Adam.
Thank you. Tomorrow is the next youth strike for climate. I look forward to joining a number of my constituents at George Square in Glasgow. The First Minister has told many of these young climate activists that the Scottish Government and her party are leading the world in tackling the climate emergency. If that's the case, why did Greenpeace's independent assessment of Westminster manifestos on the climate and nature emergency published today put the SNP below even the Conservatives and above only the Brexit Party?
First Minister.
Well, actually, for many of the reasons that people keep saying to me, because most of these issues are the responsibility of the Scottish Government. That's why we're getting on in doing it. That's why it's not a matter for our Westminster manifesto, it's a matter for the job of the Scottish Government. I mean, you know, anybody can look at the target. We've set the most ambitious targets anywhere in the world in terms of reducing emissions. We have gone beyond the UK Government. We are taking actions that are way beyond not just other governments in the UK, but most other governments across the world, and will continue to do so. I'm looking forward to taking part in the Channel 4 leaders' debate on climate change this evening. At the last point at which I was updated in this, Boris Johnson is still running scared of it, but I hope he changes his mind and joins us on the platform tonight.
George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of leaked documents outlining initial trade discussions between the UK and US governments. Can the First Minister outline what impact a trade deal like this could have on our NHS?
First Minister.
Well, a trade deal with the US potentially could open up our health service to private operators. It could lead to an increase in drug prices if there were agreements done with drug companies to, for example, extend patents, something that I believe was mentioned in the paperwork that was leaked yesterday. That is the risk to our health service if Boris Johnson and the Tories get their way. So I think the priority for people in Scotland over the next couple of weeks is to make sure Boris Johnson doesn't get his way and we get Boris Johnson out of office and protect our National Health Service.
Question number 4, Stewart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what actions the Scottish Government is taking to eliminate violence against women and girls.
First Minister.
Today is the 4th day of the International 16 Days of Activism to highlight that violence against women and girls is still too prevalent globally. It serves as a reminder to all of us that each and every part of government, the public sector and wider society has an important role to play in tackling this violence, and I'm sure that the Chamber is united in agreeing that violence against women and girls must become a thing of the past. For the Scottish Government, a progress report on Equally Safe, our strategy to tackle violence against women and girls, was published on Monday, setting out recent actions. These include the implementation of our domestic abuse legislation, our support for frontline services and our improvement work across a range of settings. In addition, yesterday we introduced new legislation on improving forensic medical services for victims of rape and sexual assault.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the First Minister for that reply, and the First Minister will be aware that zero tolerance reference a survey carried out by Women's Support Project that indicates that disabled women are twice as likely to experience men's violence as non-disabled women. Statistics also show that BME women and trans women are also at a higher risk of experiencing gender-based violence. Can the First Minister provide assurances that groups of women and girls who are thought to be more at risk of male violence will receive the targeted support that they actually require?
First Minister.
Well, can I thank Stewart McMillan for raising this issue and for raising this particular aspect of the issue. We should never stop being shocked at the violence that is perpetrated against women. And all of us should be aware that along with their gender, women and girls have other protected characteristics that can increase their level of risk of experiencing both violence and abuse. Our Equally Safe strategy recognises that, and we are also funding initiatives to target support at particular groups. We've got to continue to ensure that our efforts are targeted at tackling men's violence against women and be very clear that all forms of violence are a fundamental violation of human rights and will not and must not be tolerated.
Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister may be aware today of BBC research which was published that shows that violence during consensual sex is becoming normalised. We need to challenge this attitude within Scotland, and to do that we need to invest properly in preventative work. Rape Crisis Scotland estimate that by 2020 they will deliver a programme in 48% of secondary schools, and I understand that Mentor in Violence Prevention programme is currently delivering in 25 local authorities. These figures are encouraging, but can I ask when all young people will receive proper preventative programmes?
First Minister.
Well, can I thank Claire Baker for raising this issue, because I think this issue is an issue of acute concern. She described it, and I think rightly, as the normalisation of violence within consensual sex and sexual relationships. I have also, as I'm sure many people have been alarmed at some of the, and I don't want to tread into matters of criminal justice here or decisions of independent courts, but the use of defences in criminal court cases about violence being part of consensual sex. So and there is a real danger here that younger women are encouraged to see that as something that they have to accept as part of a consensual sexual relationship. So I think there is a really big issue here to make sure that young women in particular have the information and the awareness and the education. Claire Baker is right to talk about the importance of education in schools, and that has to be part of the routine education around relationships and sexual health. And we will continue to consider, in addition to the programmes that are already taken forward in schools, what more we can do to focus on that particular issue.
Question number 5, Jamie Green.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to address the reported £3 billion backlog in road maintenance repairs.
First Minister.
Responsibility for local roads maintenance lies with local authorities. The majority of funding to local authorities from the Scottish Government is via block grant. We don't stipulate how they should utilise their allocations, but in 2019-20 we're delivering a funding package of £11.2 billion for local authorities, which is a real terms increase of £310 million. The Scottish Government invested £470 million in managing, maintaining and operating the Scottish Trunk Road network in 2019-20, which is an increase of £33 million on the year before. And we have also invested significantly in the motorway network, as evidenced through the recent completion of both the AWPR and the M73 and M74 projects.
Jamie Green.
Can I thank the First Minister for the update? Last week, the Rural Economy Committee wrote to the Transport Secretary expressing concern over the state of Scotland's roads. And it was clear that on current funding levels, this problem is only going to get worse. The First Minister talked about local road maintenance, but the reality is there is a £1.2 billion backlog of trunk road maintenance, roads which are under direct responsibility of the Scottish Government. Starting off, so poor road conditions, it's not just an inconvenience to drivers, but it's also a serious safety issue to cyclists, motorcyclists and other users. The First Minister will be pleased to know that the UK Government has committed to invest an additional £2 billion towards potholes, of which £176 million will come to Scotland. So, First Minister, can you confirm if this money will be directly invested in road maintenance? But more importantly, when can we expect this huge backlog of repairs to be dealt with so that Scotland's roads are finally fit for purpose?
First Minister.
Well, these are serious issues. These issues are raised with me by my constituents, as I'm sure they are by the constituents of every member in this chamber. That's exactly why the Scottish Government delivered the increases in funding that I mentioned in my first answer. I may point out, of course, that the Conservatives voted against those increases in funding in our budget. And, of course, the Scottish Conservatives urged us, instead of investing in road maintenance and public services like health and education, to give a tax cut to the wealthiest in our country, which would have taken even more money out of our budget. And in terms of the so-called additional money promised by the Conservative Party, I noticed that Jamie Green said we're going to get £176 million, apparently. Well, you know, I welcome any extra money that comes from UK governments, but that has to be set against the £1.5 billion that will be taken out of our, in real terms, that our budget will lose next year compared to at the start of this decade. The Tories have taken money out of Scotland's budget. They would want to take even more out with their tax cuts for the richest, which makes it a bit galling when week after week they come here asking for more money to be spent on all sorts of things. Maybe the Tories should focus on stopping robbing Scotland's budget before they come and raise these issues here.
Question number 6, Monica Lennon.
To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to reassure patients and families of the safety of the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital and Royal Hospital for Children.
First Minister.
Well, I would again express my sympathies to patients and families affected by the infection incidents at the Queen Elizabeth and the Royal Hospital for Children. The Health Secretary has herself met with a number of affected families and patients and is in correspondence with others. On the 4th of October, she appointed Professor Craig White to be a single point of contact for families to lead work to ensure that issues they raise are considered and that they receive responses, information and support as necessary. In addition, as I've already covered earlier on in this session, on 22nd of November, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde was escalated to stage 4 of the Government's performance framework so that we can be more closely involved in oversight of infection prevention and control, clinical governance and patient and family communication.
Monica Lennon.
Thank you. Today, the First Minister encouraged whistleblowers to speak out. Anna Sarwar has just informed her of more new and extremely serious information that has been passed to him. So it's no wonder that parents and the public fear a cover-up. We still don't even know if all of the families whose children have been affected have been notified. It's obvious that parents lost trust in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde long ago, but this government was slow to act and has allowed the board's leadership to remain in post. Surely she must see that this is no longer tenable.
First Minister.
I think I've made very clear, not just today but in previous sessions when we've been discussing these serious issues, that the Government treats these issues with the utmost seriousness, and there is an absolute determination to make sure that we understand and get to the bottom of all of the issues here and that parents have the information and the answers to the questions that they want. That's why we have taken the action we have taken. The escalation of Greater Glasgow and Clyde is the right and appropriate action to take here, and the Oversight Board will be able to ensure that these particular issues, where we consider greater oversight is required, are properly monitored. Over and above that, of course, as I've already mentioned on more than one occasion today, the independent review and the public inquiry are crucial parts of the process of making sure that parents do get the answers to the questions they have. In the meantime, as I said in my initial answer to Monica Lennon, Professor Craig White is a single point of contact for any parent who feels that there are answers they could get now that they're not getting, to make sure that that provision of information is there.
Thank you very much, and that concludes First Minister's questions. Point of order, Mr Neil Findlay.
Presiding Officer, can I ask if you have had a request from the Government for a statement to be made on the appointment of the Chair of the new Scottish Investment Bank? I'm sure you will agree this is a very important appointment, and there are reports in the media that the Chair appointed by the First Minister and Finance Secretary moved his company from Edinburgh to Bermuda for tax purposes and was then fined £8.6 million, a record at that time, fine by regulators for a conflict of interest case. Now, this is a very important appointment and should be subject to scrutiny by this Parliament. So can I ask if the Government has asked you for time for a statement to be made on this very important appointment?
Can I thank Mr Findlay for the point of order? No request has been made, as far as I'm aware, certainly not through the Parliamentary Bureau, but I would suggest to Mr Findlay that the option is open to him through his business manager to raise it through the Parliamentary Bureau, and it will be considered as with any other part of parliamentary business. Thank you very much. And on that note, we're going to conclude First Minister's questions. We're going to move on shortly to members' business in the name of Tom Arthur on St Andrew's Day. But we'll just take a moment. We'll actually suspend business for a few moments just to allow new members of the gallery to come through and ministers to change seats. A short suspension.
May I ask members of Parliament who are leaving the chamber to do so quietly, please? And the next item of business is members' business debate on motion 19741 in the name of Tom Arthur on St Andrew's Day. And this debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Would those who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Tom Arthur to open the debate for around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'd like to
begin by thanking all those members who signed my motion to enable this debate to take place, and to thank in advance everyone who will be contributing this afternoon. And of course, I bring this debate to the Chamber in recognition of St Andrew's Day on the 30th of November, on Saturday. As the convener of the St Andrew's Day cross-party group, I think it is very important that we take this time as politicians on to reflect what St Andrew's Day means, and more widely, what being Scottish means to us in all senses of the term. It is my normal practice in debates, Presiding Officer, to generally speak from a few notes or bullet points, and perhaps often from speaking later reflect on the comments that other members have made. However, I've taken a slightly different approach. I have the privilege of having a young man named Kyle from the United States who's interning for me as part of a university programme, as I know many other members are. So I was keen to get a sense of what Kyle's reflections would be of St Andrew's Day from the United States, and as someone over here visiting Scotland. So much of what I say has been prepared in conjunction with Kyle, and is informed by some of his reflections and understandings of St Andrew's Day. So St Andrew's Day, as many know, is a day to celebrate the patron saint of Scotland, for which the holiday derives its name. According to Catholic teachings, or Christian teachings more generally, St Andrew was born in Bethesda on the Sea of Galilee and served as one of Jesus' 12 disciples, along with his brother Simon Peter. Little is known about the life of St Andrew, but it is believed that he died while being bound to an X-shaped cross in Patras, Greece, which was the inspiration behind our beloved flag. It is unclear how St Andrew became our patron saint, as he never stepped foot in Scotland. But of course there are many different stories and traditions. Some sources say that King Angus in the 9th century had a dream about the aforementioned X-shaped cross before a battle with England. However, he vowed that if he ever won against the English in this particular battle, he would anoint St Andrew as Scotland's patron saint. As fortune had it, King Angus won, and the rest is history. Beyond the distinctly scriptural definition of this holiday, St Andrew's Day is a celebration of what it means to be Scottish. Now, as it's been suggested to me, to many around the world, Scotland is symbolised by magnificent bens covered in powdery snow, Highland cows with majestic manes, expansive lochs that may or may not contain certain mythical creatures, whisky that warms the soul, and, as Kyle put it, kilted men on street corners playing bagpipes with varying levels of success. In recent years, Scotland is also associated with a certain wizard with a scar of a lightning bolt upon his forehead, who learns his craft at a school set in the Scottish Highlands. However, it was interesting what Kyle reflected here. To be truly Scottish, however, one must embrace the unique spirit of Scotland. He said, "I think anyone who visits Scotland will quickly be struck by the compassion of the Scottish people, the kindness that is just built into Scottish society, helping others when they are in need, even if we ourselves are down on our luck. To be Scottish also means to be inclusive of others. If the makeup of this Parliament isn't proof enough, with 5 different party leaders representing the different viewpoints of the Scottish people," Kyle said, "I don't know what is." And he notes furthermore that it was not long ago when nearly all of the parties were led by women in this chamber, and where half the party leaders were members of the LGBT community, suggesting that this is unheard of anywhere else, and something that we can be very proud of, Presiding Officer. It is in this spirit that St Andrew's Day fittingly coincides with Fair Saturday. Now, Fair Saturday, for those who aren't aware, is to some extent the polar opposite of Black Friday, which takes place tomorrow. Black Friday marks the peak of consumerism, with people around the world capitalising on sharp discounts to mark the start of the Christmas season. To counteract this rush of consumerism, Fair Saturday is a worldwide movement to give to charity by participating in a variety of community and cultural activities. And I am delighted to see that 32 communities around Scotland are participating in Fair Saturday across all our local authorities. And some of the many events around Scotland include plays, arts and crafts, film screenings, live music, and of course local St Andrew's Day festivals. In support of Fair Saturday, Presiding Officer, I'd like to take a few moments to highlight some of the events happening in my constituency of Renfrewshire South. The first I'd like to highlight is the off a Scottish winter wonderland in Barrhead. This annual event features live Christmas music, pony rides, the Santa Express train, the fireworks displays, and opportunities to take pictures with Santa himself. Entrance to the event is free of charge, but there is a small donation request to have photos taken with Santa, and all of those proceeds go towards making Christmas dinner parks for families who are less fortunate in East Renfrewshire. Second event I'd like to mention is Johnston's Christmas Light Switch On. During this event, there will be a host of local bands playing on the centre stage. At 5 p.m, the music will stop for the lighting of the Christmas tree, followed by more Christmas-related events. And all of the proceeds from this event go to St Vincent's Hospice and Active Communities, an organisation that promotes physical activity and well-being across Renfrewshire. Excellent examples of people coming together in celebration of St Andrew's Day and Fair Saturday to benefit the local communities. The last point I wish to make, Presiding Officer, is further in the sort of genuine international spirit of St Andrew's Day, because it is not something, of course, that's just limited to Scotland. As Kyle notes, organisations around the world are preserving and celebrating their Scottish heritage. One such place that displays exceptional Scottish spirit is in the state of Maine in the US, the home of Kyle. Now, his hometown is, and I am being trained in how to pronounce this correctly, but I will probably still get it wrong, is Bangor, not Bangor, Bangor. And Bangor in Maine is home to the Anna Highlanders, a pipe band that plays to raise money for the Anna Shriners Children's Hospital, which treats children that need specialised care such as those with cleft palate, cerebral palsy and spina bifida. Additionally, Maine is home to St Andrew Society, which hosts events such as the annual Highland Games and the Robert Burns Dinner to raise money for their scholarship fund, awarded to students studying subjects related to Scottish culture and heritage. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I would like to thank Kyle for his contribution in helping me to prepare these remarks. I think it's very illustrative of the international aspect of St Andrew's Day, that when two individuals from different parts of the world can meet and within a few hours of discussion suddenly discover all these connections through St Andrew's Day, it does symbolise the way in which St Andrew's unifies not just the Scottish diaspora, but can bind people from across the world together in those shared values. And I very much look forward to hearing other members' contributions throughout this debate, and I'd also encourage all members to engage in their local communities over the weekend to celebrate Fair Saturday and St Andrew's Day. Thank you.
We'll move now to the open debate. The speeches of 4 minutes, please. Alistair Allen, followed by Bill Bowman.
Presiding Officer, there are many strong arguments why countries should celebrate their national days. Community cohesion, the celebration of diversity, the promotion of cultural heritage, and the chance to turn a friendly face to the wider world. So can I congratulate Tom Arthur for bringing this motion before us today, and thanks also to the efforts of a number of dedicated people, not least Dennis Canavan, I should mention, who have campaigned tirelessly to see St Andrew's Day celebrated more and more. It is only fair to observe that looking at many other countries' national days, that we do still have some way to go in Scotland to catch up. Ireland, of course, celebrates St Patrick's Day on a scale that rivals any other country's national day for its sheer international reach. Norway celebrates Constitution Day on a huge scale every year, involving probably every child in Norway in enormous parades, not least in Oslo, where the streets outside the Royal Palace become a huge sea of Norwegian flags and national costumes. And of course, the many countries around the world which have declared their independence from the UK all very understandably celebrate this fact in some style, taking their lead from the USA, who mark each 4th of July with fireworks, barbecues, parades and picnics. Meanwhile, India, interestingly, celebrates both an Independence Day and a Republic Day with, among other things, public kite battles. So why does comparatively little of this stuff happen in Scotland on our National Day, although there have been many improvements, as other speakers I'm sure will mention? Well, the historic answer to that question is to say that at the time of the Reformation, All Saints' Days, as well as Christmas and Easter, were disestablished by the state, in fact by this Parliament. Hence the Scots preference thereafter for other festivals like Hogmanay. Christmas only became a public holiday again in Scotland in 1958. And since then, however, it has slightly overshadowed most of the winter, including St Andrew's Day. But, all of that said, interest in St Andrew's Day continues to grow. And perhaps the lack of any obvious traditions around the day is both an obstacle, but perhaps also an opportunity for us. It gives us the chance to do new things to celebrate the day. For instance, the Scottish Government has promoted a social media campaign entitled One Kind Act, with a presence on Instagram and Twitter. And this encourages people to post pictures of acts of kindness. In a similar vein, the Government is also, as we've heard, partnering with Fair Saturday, a non-profit making organisation that focuses on supporting artists and cultural organisations to mark the St Andrews weekend. And doing so in a way that provides, as Tom Arthur also mentioned, an interesting contrast with Black Friday and the ethos that it perhaps has come to represent. So there is much now happening in Scotland to mark St Andrew's Night, as well as, of course, the St Andrew's Night dinners around other parts of the world. There are still obstacles to overcome, it must be said, not least the fact that we do really need to agree a single day each year when there will be a public holiday celebrated, and in what form. I remember running up against the Yes Minister-like reality when I was the relevant minister in this area, the Yes Minister-like reality that probably declaring a public holiday would require primary legislation, possibly from Westminster. Perhaps the current minister can offer a take on that, and whether I'm wrong or not. There must be things that we can do meanwhile, at least, to ensure that we to celebrate more. And I conclude as I began by saying that there are many arguments that can be made for national days. Ultimately, however, a national festival should be about having fun and celebrating Scotland. And for everyone who wants to do that, St Andrew's Day is a very good idea. So, last on the leave, Eldrisguive, no the Hike.
Bill Bowman, followed by Emma Harper.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I thank Tom Arthur, with Kyle's help, for bringing this debate to the Parliament. St Andrew's Day is the feast day of St Andrew, Scotland's official national day, and is celebrated on November the 30th. In 2006, the Scottish Parliament passed the St Andrew's Day Bank Holiday Scotland Act 2007, which designated the day as an official bank holiday. I believe relics of St Andrew were on display in the Parliament 1 year ago in an event sponsored by Elaine Smith, MSP. While St Andrew is generally revered in Scotland from around 1000 AD, he did not become the official patron saint until the signing of the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320. And it wasn't until the 18th century that popular celebration of his day became commonplace. Since then, St Andrew has become involved in so much of Scotland's culture. For example, the flag of Scotland, the St Andrew's Cross, was chosen in honour of him, and I've managed to find my tie today with the saltire on it. Despite all the history surrounding St Andrew's Day is not as well known as festivals such as St Patrick's Day in Ireland, as we've already heard, even although it is believed that the celebration of St Andrew as a national festival stretches back to some point in the 11th century during the reign of Malcolm III. However, despite it not being as famous as other festivals, it is not only a national holiday in Scotland. St Andrew is also the patron saint of Cyprus, Greece, Romania, Russia, Ukraine, Tenerife and Barbados. There may be others. Having lived and worked in Romania for 10 years, I thought I would touch upon how St Andrew's Day is celebrated not only here at home, but also worldwide, with a particular focus on some of the celebrations and customs in Romania. The story of St Andrew in Romania tells us that Romania was Christianized by St Andrew in the 1st century AD, and this is accepted by both the Romanian Orthodox Church and the Romanian state, with St Andrew named as the patron saint of Romania. There are various activities that people engage in as a way of celebrating old Romanian beliefs associated with the feast of St Andrew. These include bringing out garlic to ward off ghosts and eating salty bread in the hope of dreaming of the person they will marry. Well, there's a tip. Interestingly, given that some wish to see wolves reintroduced into Scotland, in Romania, St Andrew is invoked to ward off wolves on St Andrew's Day. On this day, wolves are thought to be able to eat any animal they want to, and they're able to speak to humans. The belief is that a human hearing a wolf speak to him will die, and so they invoke St Andrew to protect themselves from this, so you have been warned. Finally, I want to touch on St Andrew's Day Fair Saturday, which is Scotland's contribution to the global celebration of Fair Saturday. This is a global mobilisation that aims to create a positive social impact following Black Friday, that great expression of consumerism. Artists and cultural organisations from all across Scotland and all around the world will get together in a global festival following just one requirement: to support a social cause of their choice close to their heart and the wider celebration of St Andrew's Day through their show. There are events being held across the northeast of Scotland in my region, in both Aberdeen and Dundee, amongst other places, which include Cayleys, cathedral services, as well as a concert in Dundee where the decks of HMS Unicorn will be filled with lively traditional tunes from Shetland, mainland Scotland and Ireland. So, Presiding Officer, to conclude, St Andrew's Day is a very important day both in Scotland and globally. And while many people may not be aware of St Andrew's wider connections out with Scotland, it is clear that he was and continues to be an important figure, especially at this time of year. It is also encouraging to see that other celebrations and events are emerging as a result of St Andrew's Day, and in particular for me as a North East Region MSP, encouraging to see places like Dundee and Aberdeen getting involved. Thank you.
Emma Harper, followed by Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First of all, congratulations must go to Tom Arthur for bringing this debate to Chamber today, and of course Tom's intern Kyle for his research and contribution. It is great that St Andrew's Day, the 30th of November, marks the start of the winter festivals for the programmes in Scotland and the links created with the Fair Saturday movement. I'd like to focus my time on two issues: the purpose of Fair Saturday and St Andrew's Fair Saturday as one, and the Big Burns Supper Festival in Dumfries. Presiding Officer, in preparing for this debate, following reading Mr Arthur's motion, I followed up on the information described about the Fair Saturday movement. And Fair Saturday is a positive initiative, independent, apolitical and respectful of human rights. It aims to create a global cultural movement with a positive impact on society. And it is an opportunity for artists and cultural organisations and communities to come together in a unique festival and support social causes. South Ayrshire Council in my South Scotland region have a St Andrew's Fair Saturday event at the Citadel Leisure Centre, where the fun swimming pool will be opened. And there's also community engagement events organised across South Ayrshire Council region to help tackle isolation and loneliness. And I'm also encouraging Dumfries and Galloway Council to promote the St Andrew's Fair Saturday events next year, as I have written to D&G Council to raise awareness of the Scottish Government's St Andrew's Day Fair Saturday initiative. And I am aware, though, there are other local activities planned by Dumfries and Galloway Multicultural Association and the Mool charity, which is massive outpouring of love. I wish them both well this Saturday. And also, I would like to briefly mention the Lamb for St Andrews campaign, which is promoted by Quality Meat Scotland. I would encourage everybody to eat lamb on Saturday because it's good for you. So Quality Meat Scotland should be commended for that campaign. Mr Arthur's motion describes the events and festivals in his constituency, and I'm intrigued by the Offie Scottish Winter Wonderland, and I'm sure Tom Arthur will be able to regale me with more detail later. Presiding Officer, turning to the Big Burns Supper Festival. The Big Burns Supper Festival in Dumfries is held in January as part of the celebrations of the 25th of January, the birth date of Scotland's National Bard Robert Burns. The Big Burns Supper Winter Festival is now known as Scotland's biggest Burns Night party and the warmest winter festival set in the historic, vibrant South Scotland capital. Every year, the family-friendly event, which is now in its 9th year, will welcome 150 shows, 300 artists and over 11 performance days. Various venues include bars, cafes, art galleries, museums and the oldest working theatre in Scotland, refurbished last year with Scottish Government support. That's the Theatre Royal. The famous Spiegel Tent is another wonderful place which has become the host venue for many live acts and is also where the international burlesque cabaret show Le Haggis will be performed. Ellisland Farm, located just outside Dumfries, is the farm where Robert Burns lived before moving to Dumfries. And that's the farm where he wrote his most famous poem, Tam O'Shanter. And I'm glad to say it has now joined the Big Burns Supper as a host venue site. The funding for the Fair Starter, the Scottish Government's programme, is through Event Scotland and the Holyrood Trust. And the Big Burns Supper Festival also gets support from Carlisle City and Dumfries and Galway Councils. So thank you to all the supporters for enabling this festival. Next year is its 10th year, and so that will be an exciting event to attend, and perhaps the Minister would come and join me at Le Haggis next year. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I again want to welcome this debate, thank Tom Arthur and Kyle, and encourage all to take part in St Andrew's Fair Saturday.
The last of the open debate contributions is from Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Tom Arthur for securing today's debate. I have appreciated listening to the history of St Andrew's Day from other members and Robert Burns as well, but today it more typically marks the start of Scotland's winter festivals and all the related seasonal celebrations. But it also provides an opportunity to step back from the festival preparations, to take a break from the buying and the planning, and to think more about the celebration of our culture. A modern part of St Andrew's Day is Fair Saturday, which seeks to create a positive social aspect by bringing people together in a way which can contrast with much of the commerciality which is part of the festive season. Black Friday, once little known outside of the US, has quickly become an event here in the UK which lasts for days, if not weeks. It can provide an opportunity to pick up a pre-Christmas bargain, although which are publishing evidence this week that exposes some of the false bargains for what they really are. I have been, like other people, inundated with emails and adverts encouraging me to spend even more at this time of year. When we get these Black Friday deals, we should remember how these kind of deals work and the potential impacts they have on workers and for smaller businesses. Many businesses and smaller producers are unable to compete with the large brand offers, perhaps because they are struggling to keep prices low while maintaining fair wages, or perhaps due to quality production methods having higher costs attached. I would encourage members to think about smaller producers, ethical businesses, fair traders and local enterprises tomorrow, and what they have to offer in terms of quality produce at a fair price. So this weekend, thousands of artists and cultural organisations across the world will celebrate Fair Saturday. I am pleased that a number of events are taking place across my region, including many at libraries in Fife, such as art exhibitions, family fun days and creative mindfulness colouring. At each library, food donation areas will be set up for local food bank charities. In St Andrews itself, there will be particular celebrations, including storytelling and craft sessions, an international ceilidh and the Big Torch Parade, music and fireworks as part of the Big Hoolie. As in previous years, Historic Environment Scotland are providing thousands of free tickets to visit abbeys, palaces, castles and cathedrals over the weekend, letting people across the country access historic buildings and learn about their history and culture. It's a great opportunity to get inside some of Scotland's great attractions, including Stirling Castle, Doon Castle, Dunfermline Abbey and Palace, Aberdare Castle and Castle Campbell, all within my region. As part of St Andrew's Day Fair Saturday, all over Scotland events and activities will bring together people to celebrate sharing, fairness and social inclusion. It is an opportunity for us to celebrate the culture of Scotland and to promote inclusivity and compassion. It is a day to show Scotland as a welcoming and open place to live and work. The briefing for this debate from BMIS is a welcome reminder of how St Andrew's Day does and should reflect the increasingly ethnic and cultural diversity of our communities, with local multicultural celebrations taking place across Scotland. Such events are an important opportunity to celebrate community cohesion and collaboration in an atmosphere of respect and solidarity. St Andrew's Day is a day where we can also reaffirm our opposition to racism in all its forms and celebrate the racial and ethnic diversity of Scotland. The annual STUC St Andrew's Day March and Rally Against Racism will take place on Saturday at Glasgow Green, an important event in terms of demonstrating the diversity and inclusivity that is vital to Scotland. So St Andrew's Day is a day of national celebration. It provides a chance for us to enjoy our cultural heritage and to encourage the diversity of Scotland and the positive relationships that exist across our communities. It is a reminder of the importance of promoting tolerance and dispelling ignorance, of bringing people together and appreciating all of the aspects which make Scotland the vibrant and welcoming country that it is. Thank you.
Now call Ben McPherson to respond to the debate for around 7 minutes. Please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And as Minister for Europe, Migration and International Development, I am delighted that my portfolio also includes the celebration of Scotland's winter festivals, including, of course, St Andrew's Day. And it's great to have this opportunity, thanks to Tom Arthur and all other members who've supported his motion, to debate the importance of St Andrew's Day in Parliament this afternoon. And I would also like to thank the members of the cross-party group at this point too, as well as all members for such positive and enlightening contributions today. Boosted by a funding contribution of £400,000 from the Scottish Government, the most obvious aim of the winter festivals is to boost Scotland's dynamic tourism and event sectors. But what's more important is that it's not all about finance, in fact, quite the opposite, because the winter festivals are about so much more. Our winter festivals are positively and purposefully entangled and entwined with boosting Scotland's international profile, enhancing our collective confidence, and affirming and promoting our shared values of fairness, kindness, inclusivity, and internationalism. And this is what St Andrew's Fair Saturday is all about, galvanising the people of Scotland and those with an affinity to Scotland all around the world to celebrate and affirm together the diverse, compassionate and outward-looking society that we have in Scotland and we are always seeking to strengthen and build. And reflecting the progressive and compassionate spirit of the Fair Saturday movement, the common thread that connects all of our St Andrew's Day celebrations, again this year, is a focus on encouraging Scots from far and wide to support others by engaging in small acts of kindness, as Alistair Allen highlighted. Whether it's helping a relative, friend, neighbour or stranger, or showcasing compassion where it's needed. Whether it's contributing to a local cause or an international charity, or inviting friends and partners to mark the occasion together, as we are this afternoon. Throughout Scotland, on the 30th of November, the Scottish Government is encouraging everyone to engage in St Andrew's Fair Saturday through one kind act. The aim of all of this is not only to make a difference, but also to make Scotland's celebration of St Andrew's Day something unique. By keeping local communities at the very heart of the activities, by reflecting our core values and global reputation for championing social justice, by expressing the importance we place on the vital and integral role of our young people in our society, and by working together to strengthen the inclusive nature of the modern Scottish identity. Supported by funding from the Scottish Government and reflecting those shared values, there are a number of strands to our activity on St Andrew's Day and those of our partners in support of the wider celebration. The events programme for St Andrew's Fair Saturday showcases 115 events led by 65 organisations supporting 90 different charities in 33 cities, towns and other places right across the country, from Fife, as Claire Baker mentioned, to Dundee in the northeast, as Bill Bowman mentioned, to Barrhead, as Tom Arthur mentioned, all across Scotland. There are really excellent events going on, and I encourage everyone to get involved. Also, delivered by Bemis Scotland, I'm delighted that the multicultural celebration of St Andrew's Day is also going from strength to strength. This year, we welcome 22 events marking St Andrew's Day across the country with our multicultural communities. And on Saturday, the St Andrew's Day debating tournament, led by the English-speaking Union Scotland, will take place here in this Parliament, and many young people will debate the future of Scotland together here in our Parliament again. And what makes these events so special is that they are designed and delivered by local communities, celebrating their own unique and valued cultures and traditions, and also what Scotland means for them as their home. From torchlight processions to multicultural events, from music concerts to theatre, from crafts to cinema screenings, this year's St Andrew's Day celebration offers something for everyone, bringing people and communities together and demonstrating the positive plurality of modern Scotland. Because, Presiding Officer, in these times of flux and challenge, it's important to emphasise that Scotland's national identity is set within our internationalist ethos and traditions. Our sense of ourselves as Scots and the nation of Scotland is, and long has been, bound up and intertwined with a long-held wider identity as a progressive European partner and good global citizenship. And so, on our National Day, on Saturday, 30th of November, let's celebrate and come together, looking outward to the world and never inwards. Let's celebrate as part of the international Fair Saturday movement, ready to warmly welcome those from around the world who come to celebrate St Andrew's Day and the wider winter festivals, be that Hogmanay or Burns Night. And I very much hope, to answer Emma Harper, to attend the Big Burn Supper this year, and look forward to being there with you. On the 30th of November, on Saturday, we will see the biggest celebration of St Andrew's Day in recent times. It's going to be a great day, and for members in the Parliament and our activists, perhaps a welcome break from general election campaigning as part of the day. It will be a day to celebrate Scotland and our unique, evolving cultural diversity. It will be a day to think of others and a day to be kind through one kind act. And I hope it will be a day where members will support me in warmly inviting the people of Scotland and our friends across the UK, Europe and the world to join in the celebration. So, to close, Presiding Officer, in this challenging political climate, on Saturday, let's focus on building bridges through culture and art and communities coming together. Let's join together, let's make a positive difference together, and let's enjoy the celebrations of St Andrew's Day together. Thank you.
That concludes the debate, and the meeting is suspended until 2 o'clock.
Well, it's lovely to be out on such a sunny evening in Edinburgh, but it's a shame that we have to be out tonight protesting against the two-child cap and the rate clause, well more than a year since Alison Thewlis, my colleague at Westminster, first spotted it in the small print of a Tory budget.
Very glad to see such a huge demonstration today and so many people still coming along 1 year after the rate clause came into force to show their opposition to this vile and despicable policy. The UK government have never been able to justify this policy, and we saw that this week with Esther McVeigh's pathetic attempts to say that the rate clause was somehow double support for women and that gives them some kind of chance to talk about the most appalling and disturbing experience of their life.
as you can see behind me, we're at the very beginning of the All Under One banner rally. You can obviously hear the pipers behind me as events are about to kick off.
It's time to aim high, look resolutely outwards, and never, ever accept second best. Above all, it's time to believe that we can. We can build that better country we know is possible. And friends, we will.
If you enjoy watching our programmes, please help us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster by signing up to become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.